Okay, so I'll try and do this quickly because my camera battery is running out. So in a previous video I mentioned the word astral, and I thought I should explain that concept a bit. So basically it's a word that's used by theosophy and anthroposophy, many other probably traditions, but it gets traced back to Plato, and because Plato suggests that as we die we move through 7 planetary spheres, and so this idea can be taken as we have these 7 bodies that we are working with. So we have our physical body, and then the next sphere is the etheric body, the third sphere is the astral body, and the 4th sphere is the spiritual body, or the I, or the ego. The 3 further spheres, the 5th is a transformation of the astral, the 6th is a transformation of the etheric, and the 7th is a transformation of the physical. Anyway, that's just way too many things to try and unpack and make use of. But for now we're just going to concentrate on the astral, which just quickly we can say that each level sort of structures the level below it. There's like a language that's being transferred between these levels. So the spiritual world is this sort of Platonic world of forms and ideas, and this sort of merges with the astral, where so I may have my sort of, for me, we be confused there, but so that the astral, as I understand it, is it's the music of the spheres. It's obviously, you could link it to astrology, the way the planets shape us. Anyway, this music is something which moves not only up in the solar system, but down on Earth. There's astral forces which move about, and these form the etheric bodies of growing life forms. The etheric bodies then structure the physical. Anyway, so it's said that when we dream we go into the astral world, and the astral world has a whole lot of different rules than say the physical world, and then there's where else can we see the astral? I mean, for me, what I was thinking about was there's this idea of thought forms, or which I know sound a lot like, I've used this phrase before, sort of sounds very similar before. What was I saying in the last video? Thought structures and thought pictures, but they're sort of different. Let's just say thought forms. We'll just separate that off in your mind. So we can talk about thought forms as a form you might feel and see in your mind's eye when you're listening to a particular piece of music, and like there's all kinds of like accounts of this in the occult tradition, and for me at least, I always get weary and wary when people say they see a certain thing. I feel like there's a lot of sort of charlatanism which goes on, but I like to use it more in the way that I like to use a concept that Rudolf Steiner talks about, where he uses imagination as this path towards some kind of initiation knowledge. So you mean, I mean, we're just all making it up. That's how it goes. But anyway, so for me, like thinking about the astral, when I've like was reading something like the other night, I was reading this text, and I've got it written down somewhere because it was maybe 4 months ago, but then as I closed my eyes, I just had this very like this sort of colourful structural thing going on that I just felt like, oh, this is like the picture of what I was just looking at, like this thing's kind of like reforming around themselves. And I mean, it's something which you could very easily link to sort of a psychedelic hallucinatory image in your mind's eye, which I found can sort of also be brought on more strongly by doing a breathing method, by doing the Wim Hof breathing method, which you can just search that as well on YouTube and you'll find out about it, Wim Hof. And basically you just take 30 breaths, hyperventilating, just like breathing in as deep as possible, and then just releasing the air, and then just doing that 30 times, and then breathing out one more time at the end of that, and then holding that out breath for as long as you feel you don't need to breathe, and then you breathe back in, and then you hold that breath. And I find like this sort of, I do it in bed, and I find like a usually some colourful fields going on and patterns and sometimes even more than that. I'll see figures or pictures that'll actually be happening there with my eyes closed. I mean, perhaps, you know, like to a certain extent, like if you just go and close your eyes in bed in a dark room, you just see things like even now, like I shut my eyes, you know, you can see there's these after images and they just seem to keep forming around themselves. And I mean, perhaps that for the Wim Hof, this is quite a rant, this video, I'm sorry, but I'll just keep going. The Wim Hof method could be simply pushing your body into a state where it may think it's actually dying. This is my theory, that but you're not doing your body any harm because you're only hyperventilating for 30 breaths, but you're pushing too much carbon dioxide out of your body and oxygenating your body so far that you trigger your pineal gland to release that DMT, which may be the same thing which releases when you're dying. Or the other time you release DMT is when you're dreaming. So we were talking before about astral and its connection perhaps to dreams, to looking at what's going on behind your eyelids. Perhaps these are just hallucinations. So as we are looking at these realms, are they hallucinations or are they some kind of picture of the astral? Well, you know, if they're just purely hallucinations, if they're misfirings in the neurons or some other system, is that they still provide us with an interpretive layer that we can use to look at the world. So much the same as, say, tarot card reading or something like that, where you know, are the tarot cards being revealed to you from some spiritual dimension, or is it just simply like a random interpretive image that you use that you have to then apply to your situation, and through some kind of probably through some inconsistency between the image and your situation, you develop a new understanding. I mean, for me, one of the most beneficial things about studying, when I studied Rudolf Steiner for a year, was that, and his ideas, was trying to hold like multiple truths at once. You know, you get an image, say, of the threefold nature of the human as body, soul, spirit, and then that would go into the fourfold: physical, etheric, astral, spiritual, go to the sevenfold, ninefold, you know, and then you have to have all these sort of holding onto these truths at once, and sort of sitting in a state of perhaps not believing these, but not dismissing these ideas and just trying to remain with multiple paradigms at once. And that for me is sort of the beauty of contradiction. The astral could also be like, it could be the Castaneda's idea of the Nagual, which is something which is that you can't actually talk about. So, if you can name it, then it's not it. So, but it nonetheless sort of sits behind everything as a complete energy that sits behind everything, like in opposition to the tonal, which is everything else that we can see, but is also all of our concepts that we use to think about the world. So for me, I still haven't quite grasped what this Nagual could be, and I guess that's the point. I was talking to Jason about Wittgenstein, and he was talking about how Wittgenstein, this is my interpretation, is saying that there's some things that this unnameable things which is impossible to talk about, and we shouldn't try and talk about, because by doing so we do mystify them. But for me, I don't really believe that. I guess the other thing with the Wim Hof that we talked about in this previous video was the breath obviously has some kind of connection to this, bringing this hallucinatory aspect. I know that there's certain breathing meditations that you can do, this active meditations where you're breathing a lot, and that's sort of changing your mind's orientation. And I know that Stanislav Grof, who was pioneering researcher when LSD was legal, that trying to use LSD to work through people's problems, perhaps as a therapeutic exercise. And when LSD became illegal, he developed something else called holotropic breathwork, which he felt worked in similar ways and brought people to similar states. So you can see there's a link there between the two.